In this section, we're going to dive into anti-gravity rules. We're going to talk about why rules are important, what you should put inside a rule, and we'll see some examples. So in order to modify your rules, you'll go to here to the three dots, additional options, customizations. Let's make it a little bit bigger. And here we have two things. We have the rules and we have the workflows. Let's talk about the rules. So why rules are so important in our daily development? First, it helps our AI coding agent, Anti-Gravity, to understand what this repo is about and add some shortcuts that will help him to navigate through this repo. And the second reason is when you set some rules, you customize the response of the models that you are using, and it will help you to make the model more adjusted to you and for your needs. Another common question when talking about anti-gravity rules is what you should put inside the rule. I'll have to think about it like I have a new developer teammate and I want to guide him and give him the shortcuts that will help him to be efficient and to boost its productivity. So every time you encounter something like this, like effect or like a trick that you encounter, you should add it as a rule. During your work with Google Anti-Gravity, you'll face some points that you feel the agent doesn't understand you. At these times, pay attention and think if a rule could solve this issue. Maybe another line, another sentence to the context of the model could solve and won't get you in this point again. During our development, we are going to attach rules and make modifications to make anti-gravity synced with our requirements. Let's start configure our first rule. Rule can be configured in a global scope or in a workspace scope. Global scope means that the rule will be configured on every workspace you have on your computer. Usually when I set rules, I set it only on my workspace and not globally, because I want the rule to be as customized as possible. But if all your projects on your computer are written in TypeScript or in Python, and you want to configure the best practices for your needs, global can be a solution for you. If you are new to anti-gravity, I should start with workspace, and after that you can move the rule from your workspace to be global. Let's see what global means. Here you can see the rule is saved in a Gemini.md file, and it's saved under .gemini folder in my user account. As we said, all the workspaces under this user will have access to this specific rule. But in our example, I want to start with the workspace rules. When I click on a workspace, it asks me to add a name for my rule. Let's call it general. Okay, so what we have here. First of all, you can see that the general.md file was added under rules folder in .agent in my workspace. Great, so what we have here? We have activation mode and we have content. Let's talk about activation mode. What is activation mode? It's how this rule should be activated for the agent. We have a few options. We have a manual option. This means that we should mention the specific rule, like we mentioned files, like this with the @ sign. We have always on. This means that the rule will always be applied and attached to our context. We have model decision. This is kind of tricky because we need to write a description that tells the agent when to load this specific rule, and after that it will load the content. And we have globe. Globe means that we can set some patterns. For example, all the JavaScript files, all the TypeScript files, all the Python files, or all the files inside a specific folder that this rule will be aligned to. In the general example, I wanted to provide all the info for the model about this specific workspace. So if we look at the options that we have here, I want it to be always on. I want all the information that I provide to be loaded, and the model will know it before it executes anything on this workspace. Next, we need to write the content of the rule. In all the needs, I already configured it with another AI coding agents. For example, I have agents.md. Agents.md does exactly that, gives all the right context to the agent. So I'm just going to copy it and paste it to the content. And now I'm going to save it. So let's see what we have right now. General.md that is always on and with the content I want. I highly recommend to write a general rule for your project before writing anything. If you don't have something that is already written, you can just go to the chat and write something like this: write a general rule for my workspace. Now I want to add the link for the documentation so the model will have more context. So I'll do link for ref, and this is the official documentation of rules and workflows. For this prompt I don't need any planning, so I'll go with fast, but I want high reasoning model because I want it to digest my repo and understand what it means. So I'll go with Gemini 3 Pro High. So this is the response. Since the rule file already exists with the current content and trigger always on, no further action is needed. The agent will automatically follow these guidelines in all future interactions. What you can take from this example: when you add a new rule that is always on, the rule will be loaded to any conversation you have in Antigravity, like you can see here. In our example, it took it even further and said that you don't need to configure another rule. That's nice, let's configure another one. So again, I'll go to additional options, customizations. Now you can see that I have the current general.md file in my rules, and it says that this is a project rule, a workspace one. This time we'll configure another type of rule. So let's click workspace. I'm going to call it SEO optimization. I want this rule to run every time I do a modification or create a new component, and I want the model to scan if there are any improvements for SEO, search engine optimizations, so my website will be searchable and people are going to get to the website by searching. Now, instead of always on, I'm going to make it a model decision. This time we have the description option as we saw, and we have the content. We're going to generate the content together with Antigravity like we did in the previous example, but we want to write the description first. Apply this rule every time a new component is created or modified. Now we want to generate our content. This is the previous chat that we created the general rule. And now I need to ask myself, should I create another conversation or should I continue in this specific session? This time I'm going to continue in this conversation and not create a new one because the context above is relevant for our future prompt. So let's write our prompt. I want to generate rule for my SEO optimization rule. And as you can see, I tagged it here in the prompt. It needs to contain the best practices for front-end components using React. That's great. I still want it to be fast, and I'm going to continue with Gemini 3 Pro High. So we got the response. It generated SEO optimization.md rule with a set of SEO best practices for React components. Let's see what we have here: metadata management, semantic HTML, images, linking, structured data, and all of these are included in the content, as you can see here. Metadata management, examples, semantic HTML, internal linking, and it also added a new checklist for new pages, which is great. So let's summarize this specific rule. It is activated by model decision only when a new component is created or modified, and these are the best practices for SEO optimization. But what if you start a new project from scratch and you want to configure your own rules? In that case, you have this website, cursor.directory. In this website, you have a rules sections over here. In this page, you can see rules that are contributed by the community. You can also see the popular ones. For example, you're a senior front-end developer and an expert in React.js, Tech.js, JavaScript, and so on. And in the rest, we have the instructions for this model. You can filter here by the programming language you use, for example, Python, and other prompts. So if you are starting a new project, you should browse to this website and see if one of these rules can help you.